Have you ever noticed that the moment you stop chasing, people suddenly start coming back? It feels almost mystical, doesn't it? As if the universe responds to our surrender in ways we never expected. The harder you cling, the more they slip away. But the moment you let go, they return. Is it fate? Coincidence? Some unseen force pulling the strings? No, it's not magic. It's not luck. And it's certainly not manipulation. It's something far more grounded, something deeply rooted in the ancient wisdom of Stoicism, a philosophy not just of thought, but of power. The kind of power that comes from mastering your emotions, choosing stillness over reaction, and becoming whole within yourself. Most people try to win others through effort, through proving, through performance, but the truth is, we don't attract through pressure, we attract through presence. And when you stop needing someone to validate your worth, you begin to radiate a calm strength that becomes unforgettable. In this video here at Stoic Station, you'll learn the inner shifts that make people return, not because you chase them, but because you stopped. So if that speaks to you, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Stoic Station, and let's begin the transformation together. 1. Be unshakable in your peace. There comes a time in every man's life when the noise around him no longer deserves a reaction, not because he's indifferent, not because he's numb, but because he's finally realized that his peace is sacred and not everyone is qualified to disturb it. You don't get to that place overnight. You get there after enough storms have passed through your life, some quiet, some violent. Some you saw coming, others hit you without warning. The betrayal that blindsided you, the silence that replaced the warmth, the day someone you loved deeply chose to walk away, without explanation or apology. And in the beginning, you reacted. You tried to understand. You reached out. You explained yourself. You tried to fix things, to hold on, to make sense of the senseless. But eventually, you learned something far more valuable than closure. You learned how to sit with the silence, how to breathe through the confusion, how to stand in the ruins of something that once felt beautiful and still choose not to collapse. That, right there, is where peace is born. Being unshakable in your peace isn't about suppressing what you feel. It's not about pretending that heartbreak doesn't sting or that rejection doesn't bruise your pride. It's about choosing how you respond to those moments. It's about knowing that no matter what someone else does, leaves you, forgets you, underestimates you, you do not owe the world a reaction that costs you your power. True peace is built through discipline, not just in your habits or your routines, but in your inner world. It's the discipline to pause when someone tries to trigger you. It's the wisdom to stay silent when someone expects you to beg. It's the strength to walk away without resentment, without the need to prove anything. A man who is calm in the chaos is a man who has made peace with the idea that not everything needs to be fixed, and not everyone is meant to stay. And ironically, that's exactly the kind of man who draws people back in. Because we live in a world filled with emotional noise, people shouting their pain, broadcasting their wounds, trying to make someone else responsible for their healing. So when someone comes across a man who isn't trying to prove, convince, or chase, it unsettles them, it intrigues them. Because calm is rare, and rare things linger in memory. When you embody peace, you become the eye of the storm. People might not understand you at first. Some might misinterpret your stillness as indifference. But those who've truly tasted chaos, the ones who have lived through drama, through unstable relationships, through emotional unpredictability, they will feel the difference. They'll recognize the gravity of your energy, the steadiness of your presence, and that recognition will stay with them even after they've left, even after they've chosen noise over your stillness, because what's calm is often not appreciated, until someone is drowning in everything that's not. Being unshakable in your peace means you don't need to chase clarity from someone who gave you confusion. You don't need to raise your voice to be heard by someone who's committed to misunderstanding you. You don't need to prove your worth to someone who couldn't see it. You already know who you are, and their recognition of that doesn't add or take away from your value. And when you operate from that place, people notice. Maybe not immediately, but in time they will. They'll remember the one man who didn't break when things fell apart, the one who didn't become bitter or vengeful or desperate, the one who remained grounded even when his heart was breaking, because that's not weakness, that's spiritual maturity, that's emotional sovereignty, that's a man who refuses to be defined by who left or who stayed or who came back. Some will come back. That's the irony. They'll circle around again, not because you chased, but because you didn't. Because you didn't feed their ego with reactions. Because you didn't fall apart when they pulled away. Because your silence became louder than their excuses. But by then, something inside you may have shifted. Maybe you've grown. Maybe you've seen yourself more clearly in solitude than you ever did in their presence. Maybe you no longer feel the need to let anyone disturb the peace you've bled to build, and that's okay, because peace isn't about getting everyone to stay. It's about knowing that no one can take your wholeness with them when they leave. This kind of peace, it changes your posture. You walk slower, speak softer, listen more. You're no longer rushing to fill the silence because you've learned to live in it. You're no longer offended by space because you've turned solitude into strength. You're no longer hungry for attention because you've remembered how to feed your own soul. When you reach this place, love doesn't become smaller, it becomes deeper. You no longer love to be chosen, you love to be aligned. You no longer give from emptiness, you give from overflow. And that kind of love, grounded in peace, is the most powerful form of love there is. It's the kind that doesn't demand anything, it doesn't rush, it doesn't perform, it simply is. And it attracts not out of need, but out of resonance. So if you've been through the storm lately, if someone left, if someone disappointed you, if something you hoped would last came to an end, pause before you act. Don't beg. Don't chase, don't argue, go inward, protect your energy, ground yourself in your values. Reconnect with the version of you that existed long before they entered your life, and remind yourself, no one has the right to shake your soul unless you hand them the permission. Make peace your home, make stillness your strength, make silence your reply to anything that doesn't deserve your presence. You're not here to prove your worth. You're here to live it. You're not here to convince anyone to stay. You're here to stay true to yourself. And if someone leaves and later realizes what they lost, that's not your burden to carry. That's the echo of your presence reverberating in the places where you once stood tall. Let your stillness be what they remember. Let your calm be what they crave. Let your peace be the proof that you never needed chaos to feel important, because the man who cannot be shaken is the man they always return to, and whether or not you open the door again, that's no longer their decision, it's yours. 2. Master emotional detachment. To master emotional detachment is to reclaim the power you never should have handed away in the first place. It doesn't mean shutting your heart down. It doesn't mean growing cold or cynical or pretending you never cared. It means standing in the full presence of your emotions, heartache, disappointment, hope, love, and refusing to let any of them rule you. It means knowing how to feel deeply without being consumed. By the time you reach your mid-30s, you've been through enough to understand this truth. People leave. Some do it quietly, others make a scene, some drift, others disappear overnight. What hurts more isn't always the goodbye. It's the silence that follows, the not knowing why, the questions you're left to answer on your own. And if you're like most men, you used to respond with urgency. You sent that follow-up message. You replayed the last conversation in your mind like a broken record. You looked for signs, for clues, for closure. You tried harder, gave more to someone who had already emotionally checked out. You thought, if I can just show them how much I care, maybe they'll come back. Maybe they'll understand. Maybe I can save it. But over time, you learned. You learned that love fueled by fear isn't love at all. It's attachment in disguise. It's an emotional dependency masked as devotion. And that version of you, the one who clung, who compromised too much, who made someone else the center of your emotional stability, that man had to die for a stronger version to emerge. Emotional detachment is the resurrection of that strength. It begins with a shift in mindset. You stop asking, why did they leave? And begin asking, why was I holding on so tightly to someone willing to walk away? You begin to recognize the difference between connection and control. You start to see how often your peace was held hostage by people who didn't even value it. And with that recognition comes release. You begin to love differently. You don't stop loving, but you stop needing. You stop begging for attention. You stop molding yourself into someone else's preferences. You stop believing that someone's temporary interest is a reflection of your permanent worth. Instead, you start showing up as a whole person, complete before anyone enters, still complete after they exit. You stop chasing closure and start choosing clarity. You stop reacting to silence and start responding with stillness. And perhaps most importantly, you begin to observe behavior instead of attaching to potential. You stop being impressed by words and start watching for consistency. Because here's the truth most men don't realize until they're older. The more you grip, the more things slip. Love that's smothered will suffocate. Attention that's demanded loses meaning. Affection that's clung to turns into pressure, not passion. Emotional detachment isn't about pushing people away. It's about giving them the freedom to choose and being strong enough to accept their choice without falling apart. You no longer beg for someone to stay. You give them space to leave, and powerfully, calmly, space to return, if they choose. But their choice no longer defines you. You're not waiting to be picked. You're standing in the life you've chosen for yourself. And that shift, that quiet, unspoken strength, is rare. That's what draws people back. Because the man who doesn't need validation is the one who commands the most respect. The one who doesn't chase is the one they start wondering about. The one who remains steady, composed and whole, without games, without emotional outbursts, is the one they remember. Not because he was loud, but because his absence was felt. What makes emotional detachment powerful isn't the absence of love. It's the presence of self. You're no longer performing for someone else's approval. You're no longer changing shape to avoid being left. You're no longer exhausting yourself trying to earn something that should be freely given. Instead, you sit back and observe. You watch who calls when you go silent, who shows up without being asked, who values your presence without needing a reminder. Emotional detachment allows you to see clearly what desperation used to blur. And when you can detach emotionally, you begin to make better decisions. Not from a place of fear, but from a place of self-respect. You no longer tolerate half-love, inconsistency, or emotional manipulation. You stop confusing chemistry with compatibility. You start asking harder questions. Does this connection honor my peace? Does this person bring out my groundedness or my anxiety? Do I feel chosen or just convenient? You learn that peace is more attractive than passion rooted in chaos. You realize that silence can reveal more than sweet words ever could. and you finally accept that not everyone deserves access to the emotional depth you once gave away so freely. That's what mastering emotional detachment gives you: the freedom to love without losing yourself. The ability to walk away, not because you don't care, but because you care about yourself more. The strength to say, "This isn't aligned with who I am anymore," and move forward without bitterness, even if it hurts. Because the goal is not to be hardened, it's to be healed, not to stop feeling, but to stop bleeding for those who never tried to understand your wounds. When you love from a place of wholeness, not desperation, your love becomes a gift, not a demand. And ironically, that's what makes people want to come closer. When they sense that your world doesn't revolve around their presence, they begin to question their own gravity. They begin to miss the space you held, the calm you brought, the quiet confidence you embodied. And that's not something easily replaced. So if you find yourself in a place of emotional uncertainty, someone pulling away, someone giving mixed signals, someone taking more than they give, pause. Don't react. Don't rush to fill the space. Sit with it. Let them reveal who they are when you're no longer giving. Let your absence do the talking. If they come back, let it be because they chose you, not because you pleaded. And if they don't, let that be your answer. In either case, you stay whole. You stay grounded. You stay free. Because you've mastered the quiet art of loving with your heart open, but your peace protected. And that changes everything. 3. Focus on purpose, not people. There's a quiet power in the man who knows exactly what he's building. Not because he speaks loudly about it, not because he needs to prove anything to anyone, but because his life is shaped by a deeper pull. A man aligned with his purpose moves differently. He speaks with intention. He listens with focus. And he doesn't crumble when someone leaves or shift who he is just to keep someone around. Because he understands, people are part of the journey, not the destination. Most men spend years, sometimes decades, trying to center their lives around people, around relationships, around attention, affection, and approval. And while there's nothing wrong with wanting love, the danger begins when love becomes the mission, and you forget that you were born for something greater than being chosen by someone else. You were born to build, to move with conviction, to carry vision. And when that fire is lit within you, everything begins to change. A man who is focused on his purpose becomes magnetically different, not because he's trying to be, but because he has no time to perform. He's not waking up wondering who's texting him. He's not anxiously refreshing social media. He's not waiting on the next message to feel valuable. He has already declared his value to himself, and now he's too immersed in becoming the man he was meant to be. People feel that kind of energy. Even if they can't explain it, they sense it. It's the calm confidence that doesn't need validation. It's the quiet discipline behind his words. It's the fact that he doesn't flinch when someone threatens to leave. Why? Because he's not standing still waiting for company. He's already moving. And in a world where most people are searching for someone to give them a sense of identity, the one who already has his own becomes unforgettable. You become the gravitational center, not because you demand to be, but because you've learned that nothing is more attractive than a man who is deeply rooted in himself. A man who knows where he's going, even if he has to walk alone for a while to get there. Your purpose isn't a job title. It's not just a career path. It's a direction of the soul. It's the thing that wakes you up earlier than you want. The thing that whispers to you when no one else is listening. It's the part of you that wants to create, to contribute, to elevate, to leave something behind that's bigger than just being liked. When you live with that kind of fire, people start to respond differently. Some will be drawn to it, inspired by it, even challenged by it. Others will feel intimidated because your presence demands something real something honest, something grounded. But here's the beauty of purpose. It filters for you. It exposes what was never meant to stay. It reveals who's walking beside you because they believe in your mission, and who's only there for the comfort of your attention. And when someone chooses to walk away, you don't chase. Not because you don't care, but because you no longer have the luxury of distraction. You have work to do. You have things to build. You have a life that requires your full focus, not your fragmented energy. Too many men abandon their mission in exchange for temporary closeness. They pause their progress to keep the peace. They trade vision for validation, and in doing so, they slowly forget who they were before someone else's presence became their priority. But a man who rediscovers his path, who stops making people the centerpiece of his purpose, becomes free again. He begins to invest in what's permanent, his character, his values, his legacy, and he realizes something profound. You don't attract the right people by seeking them. You attract them by becoming the kind of man whose life is so rich, so alive, so full, that others want to be part of it. Purpose creates distance, yes, but not the kind that pushes people away. It's the kind of distance that creates admiration. It builds respect. It makes people earn access to you, and more importantly, it protects you from losing yourself in people who were never capable of understanding your depth in the first place. You don't need to be loud about it. You don't need to post about your grind or shout your plans from the rooftops. Purpose doesn't always look flashy. Sometimes it looks like early mornings in silence. Sometimes it looks like declining a distraction. Sometimes it looks like walking away from a person you care about because their presence costs you more than you can afford. It takes strength to do that, to hold the line, to choose the long-term reward over the short-term comfort. But what you gain on the other side is something most never find: clarity. You begin to see how many times you gave away your focus to someone who never earned your sacrifice. You begin to realize that most people aren't looking for your purpose. They're just looking to borrow your attention for a while, but you no longer lend it so easily. You become selective, not out of arrogance, but out of alignment. You know what you're here for now. You're no longer chasing people. You're building a path that they either respect or they get left behind. And ironically, that's when they start to come back. The very ones who left when you stopped orbiting around them begin to feel the distance. They sense the absence of your attention. They start wondering what shifted, what changed, why you no longer respond the way you used to. What changed is you. You finally realized that your time is sacred, that your energy is precious, that your peace is too costly to be spent on uncertainty. You stopped seeking people to fill your life and started filling your life with something worth living for. And now, you're no longer waiting to be chosen. You've chosen your path, and if someone is worthy, they'll meet you there, not because you slowed down, but because they finally picked up the pace. So keep building, keep becoming, keep showing up for your mission like it's your responsibility, because it is. Let the world feel the shift in you. Let them sense that your attention now belongs to something higher than needing to be seen. You are not here to orbit around others. You are here to become a world of your own, and those who were meant to be there will find their way to your gravity, not because you pulled them in, but because you stopped chasing and started rising. 4. Use the power of silence. There's something profoundly unnerving about a silence that holds its ground. In a world addicted to noise, where people defend their egos with arguments, fill space with over-explanation, and chase validation through endless communication, choosing silence is not a weakness. It's a power move, a form of presence that doesn't need to be loud to be heard, because true silence isn't the absence of feeling. It's the refusal to beg for attention from those who forgot your worth. Silence is where dignity lives. When someone begins to drift, pull away, or treat your presence as if it were replaceable, the natural instinct is to respond, to clarify, to seek understanding, to explain your side, to say something, anything, to try and hold on to what feels like it's slipping through your fingers. But when you've grown, when you've healed, when you've looked in the mirror and remembered who you are, you don't move from that old place anymore. You don't chase closure that isn't offered. You don't explain yourself to someone who was never listening. You don't send messages hoping to reopen doors that were closed without care. You simply fall silent, not to manipulate, not to punish, but because your peace is no longer negotiable. That silence, when it comes from a man grounded in his value, is louder than any desperate cry, any pleading text, any last-minute speech meant to sway a decision that's already been made. It's the kind of quiet that leaves a mark, a void, a space where your presence used to live, a space that starts to feel heavier with time. People expect noise, they expect reactions, they expect you to reach out just one more time, to check in, to try harder, to make your case, because that's what they're used to. People competing for their attention, people begging to be understood. But when they're met with stillness instead, something shifts. Suddenly, they're not in control of the conversation anymore. They're left with their own thoughts, their own guilt, their own reflections. And without the sound of your voice trying to hold everything together, they're left to feel the weight of what they've done or what they've lost. That's the power of silence. It's not passive. It's piercing. When someone walks away and you respond not with pleading, but with peace, when you stop trying to prove your value and instead allow your absence to carry it, something unexpected happens. You don't shrink. You expand. You take up more space in their mind, not less. You don't fade. You haunt, not as a ghost of who you were, but as a quiet reminder of what they may never experience again. The truth is, silence doesn't just speak, it teaches. It teaches people what life feels like without your warmth, your effort, your presence. It shows them that you won't compete for a place in their life that they couldn't honor, that your value doesn't require performance, persuasion, or pain. It simply requires respect. And if they valued you, even just a little, your silence will echo. Not right away, maybe not in the first week, maybe not in the second, but eventually, often when their world quiets and distractions fade, they'll hear it. That stillness you left behind will settle into their life like a question they can't answer. Where did you go? Why haven't you reached out? Did they mean that little to you? Or, more truthfully, did you finally realize how much you meant to yourself? Silence is clarity in its purest form, because while words can be manipulated, silences cannot be faked. They reveal everything, especially the imbalance in who was willing to fight and who had already let go. So the next time someone pulls away, let them. Don't fill the void with anxious messages. Don't chase after someone who's walking away with indifference. Don't dilute your value with explanations to someone who isn't asking to understand. Let them sit in the stillness. Let them feel what it's like not to be chased. Let your absence do what your words never could. And if they come back, let it be because they truly saw you in that silence. Let it be because they realized what your words never reached. But don't break the silence just to make yourself feel temporarily heard. Because the moment you do, you interrupt a lesson they were supposed to learn. There is power in restraint. There is wisdom in stillness. There is grace in letting someone feel the absence of your energy rather than constantly offering it to those who only know how to take. Let your silence be your statement. Let your stillness be your strength. Let the space you leave behind say everything your pride is too tired to repeat. Because when you stop needing to be heard by others, that's when you finally start hearing yourself. And in that silence, You don't lose power. You become it. 5. Commit to continuous self-improvement. There is something unshakable about a man who chooses growth, not for applause, not for validation, not to win someone back, but because he refuses to remain where life once left him. When a man commits to becoming better, the world around him starts to change, not because the world itself shifts, but because he starts to see it through a different lens, one shaped by discipline, clarity, and purpose. That kind of transformation can't be faked. You can't pretend to evolve. You either rise or you repeat. You either confront the parts of yourself that were keeping you stagnant, or you continue circling the same painful patterns, hoping for a different outcome. True self-improvement begins the moment you stop asking, "How do I get them to notice me again?" and start asking, "What version of myself have I been neglecting?" It's a quiet shift, a sacred one, the day you stop measuring your worth by who stayed or left, and start defining your value by the man you're becoming day by day. That's when everything begins to realign. Growth isn't loud. It doesn't beg to be seen. It doesn't need a stage. It happens in private, often in the quiet moments when no one's watching, when you choose to go to the gym even though your heart still aches. When you pick up a book instead of reaching out to someone who once made you feel small. When you decide to stay present with yourself instead of chasing closure from someone who left you with questions they never intended to answer. It's in those moments that you begin to rise. And when you rise, it's not to get even. It's not to make them regret leaving. It's to become someone you genuinely respect. Someone whose actions reflect a deeper internal truth. Not a reactive story shaped by heartbreak or rejection, but a forward-moving narrative built on purpose. Because here's the thing no one tells you while you're healing. People returning is not the victory. Becoming someone so evolved, so grounded, so self-respecting that you no longer need their return, that's the real win. That's when healing matures into evolution. That's when you stop asking if you were enough for them and start asking whether they were ever enough for the man you're now becoming. The work isn't easy. Growth demands confrontation. It asks you to look at your habits, your triggers, your unresolved pain, and say, "I'm done using these as excuses." It forces you to hold yourself accountable in ways no one else ever will. But every time you choose progress over comfort, you reinforce something powerful inside you, self-trust. And with self-trust, you become dangerous in the best way, because nothing is more powerful than a man who is no longer at war with himself. As you grow, you begin to notice how much energy you used to spend trying to hold on to people who didn't know how to hold you. How much time you wasted decoding mixed signals instead of developing clear direction. You realize that every minute spent chasing someone who made you feel like a backup plan was a minute stolen from the man you were supposed to be building. But no more. Now your attention is sacred. Your time is invested with care. You no longer give yourself to situations that dishonor your growth, because your life has become too meaningful to be spent in places where your soul is silenced. And as you commit to this path of self-evolution, day by day, habit by habit, people will begin to notice, often silently, often from a distance, the same ones who once doubted you, the ones who thought you'd never change, the ones who left thinking you'd fall apart. They'll see you differently, not because you announced it, but because your energy has shifted. You carry yourself with more intention. You speak with less need and more presence. You move with quiet authority, not to impress, but because you've finally learned how to lead yourself. That kind of presence is rare. It makes people pause, it makes them wonder, and it makes them remember. But whether they return or not, no longer controls your worth, because when a man is rooted in self-respect, his life no longer revolves around who validates him. His confidence is forged in his consistency. His power is found in the progress no one clapped for. His value is self-made. So if you're in the season where everything feels uncertain, if you're still raw from the loss, still questioning the past, still grieving who you thought would walk beside you, let this be your turning point. Not the moment you try to rebuild what fell apart, but the moment you begin building something new, starting with yourself. Ask yourself, what would it look like if I showed up for me every single day, not to prove anything, not to chase anyone, but because I refuse to abandon myself again? What if, instead of waiting for them to recognize your worth, you created a life so powerful that they couldn't ignore it, even if they tried? That's what continuous self-improvement gives you. It doesn't just change how others see you, it changes how you see yourself. And once that vision becomes clear, once you begin to truly admire the man you're becoming, you stop settling, you stop shrinking, you stop returning to the places that made you doubt yourself in the first place. Because now your standards rise with your effort, your boundaries sharpen with your discipline, and your identity, it's no longer shaped by who chooses you, but by how you choose yourself. So wake up with intention, go to bed with pride. Let your life be a quiet revolution, a daily reminder that no matter who walks in or out, you are becoming unstoppable. Not for them, for you. 6. Set boundaries and enforce them. There comes a point in a man's life when he stops asking for respect and starts requiring it, quietly, firmly, and without negotiation. That turning point is marked by a single profound realization. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. Boundaries are not built out of bitterness. They're not tools for control. They're not drawn out of fear or resentment. Boundaries are self-respect in action. They are a declaration to the world that your time, your peace, your energy, and your presence are not for sale to the lowest bidder. For many men, especially those who've been raised to prioritize being liked over being respected, the idea of setting boundaries can feel foreign, even selfish. We've been conditioned to believe that endurance equals strength, that sacrificing our needs is noble, that staying silent keeps the peace. But in time, life reveals a hard truth. What you don't define, others will define for you. And what you don't protect, others will exploit, intentionally or not. You may not even realize how much of yourself you've surrendered until it becomes unbearable, until the relationship feels one-sided, until your emotional space is consistently invaded, until you're drained from giving without receiving. That's when the discomfort starts to whisper. You're abandoning yourself for the illusion of connection. Boundaries are how you stop that slow erosion. They are not meant to push people away. They are meant to filter who truly values your presence. When someone respects your boundaries, they are not being restricted. They are being shown the path to access you with honor. And if someone walks away because you drew a line, understand this: they were never coming close to you with the right intentions in the first place. Too often, we confuse unconditional love with unconditional tolerance. But real love, the kind worth keeping, doesn't demand the destruction of self. It doesn't ask you to silence your voice, overlook patterns, or make excuses for consistent disrespect. Real love breathes in the space that boundaries create. It grows where truth is spoken and standards are enforced. It's not enough to set boundaries. You must be willing to stand by them, especially when they're tested, because they will be. Sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously, people will challenge your limits to see if you truly mean what you say. If you flinch, if you backtrack, if you compromise too soon, you send a loud message. My word is flexible, my values are negotiable, my worth depends on keeping you around. But the moment you walk away from someone who cannot respect your boundaries, you reclaim something priceless: your integrity. You remind yourself that you are not here to constantly explain what should be obvious. You are not here to rescue people from the consequences of their behavior. You are not here to trade your self-respect for temporary attention. This is especially important if you've spent years people-pleasing. You'll notice how your energy shifts when you stop trying to manage how others feel and start focusing on how you feel in their presence. You'll begin to see who was drawn to you only because your boundaries were loose, who stayed because you made life easier for them by making it harder for yourself. Let them leave. Let them be uncomfortable. Let them confront the version of you that no longer bends, just to avoid disappointment. You are not obligated to keep anyone in your life who cannot meet you at the level of your growth. That includes lovers, friends, even family. Relationships don't get a free pass simply because of history. Respect is the rent people pay to stay in your life, and your boundaries are the lease. And yet, don't mistake firmness for coldness. You can set boundaries with grace. You can say no with kindness. You can protect your peace without becoming bitter or distant. Because true strength is quiet. It doesn't need aggression. It's simply unwavering. You don't need to shout your boundaries. You just need to embody them. Speak them once, and let your actions do the rest. Boundaries are how you move from desperation to discernment. You stop chasing people to stay, and you start observing who respects your space without needing to be told twice. You stop begging for consistency, and you start paying attention to patterns. And in that clarity, your relationships begin to shift. What once felt like loss now feels like liberation. What once drained you now disappears on its own. You begin to see how much peace you gain when you stop tolerating emotional uncertainty. How much energy you save when you stop trying to control how others perceive you. How much dignity returns to your life when you stop breaking your own rules just to make others comfortable. The irony is, the moment you start enforcing boundaries, the right people don't flee. They rise, they adapt, they respect the structure because they understand it protects something sacred, your sense of self. The wrong ones, they resist, they manipulate, they test, and eventually they leave. Let them, because boundaries don't just protect your peace, they protect your potential. When your emotional space is no longer cluttered with chaos, inconsistency, and codependency, you have room to grow, to create, to evolve. You begin living from a place of intention, not reaction. And you become the kind of man who no longer fears losing people because he knows he'll never lose himself again. So if you're tired of being overlooked, undervalued, or used, if you're exhausted from one-sided relationships that leave you feeling small, this is your moment. Draw the line, not in anger, but in truth. Not to hurt others, but to honor yourself. Stand by that line, not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. Because the way you protect your boundaries is the way you protect your future. And the world, those who matter, will treat you accordingly. 7. Detach from outcomes. There's a quiet turning point in a man's life when he finally loosens his grip on what he thought he needed, not because he gave up, but because he grew up. It's the moment when chasing is replaced by presence, when anxiety is replaced by peace, when the obsession with controlling outcomes is replaced with trust. Trust not in other people but in himself, and in the unfolding of life exactly as it's meant to be. Detaching from outcomes is one of the most powerful forms of freedom a man can give himself. Because when you're no longer held hostage by whether or not something works out in your favor, you stop living in fear. You stop bargaining with your worth. You stop bending yourself into someone else's mold, hoping they'll stay, hoping things will go as planned, hoping life doesn't abandon you in the middle of your effort. And in that release, you reclaim something far more valuable than certainty. You reclaim yourself. We've all been there, gripping tightly to a desired outcome, wanting her to stay, needing the closure, hoping they'll see your value, believing that if you just do the right things, say the right words, show enough love, it'll all fall into place. But the more tightly you hold on, the more you begin to lose yourself in the process. You start measuring your peace by someone else's choices. You start delaying your healing until they come back. You start shaping your identity around something or someone that exists outside of you. That's not love. That's dependency dressed up in hope. The truth is, the more attached you are to a particular result, the more power you give away. Your happiness becomes conditional. Your confidence becomes fragile. Your sense of peace begins to live on a countdown clock, waiting for someone else's validation before it can exhale. But detachment is different. It's not a wall. It's not indifference. It's not pretending you don't care. It's recognizing that you can deeply value something or someone without being ruled by the outcome. It's knowing you can give fully without needing to control what you get back. It's understanding that you can love honestly while still being willing to walk away if that love isn't returned with the same depth and respect. That's strength. That's maturity. That's self-respect in its purest form. When you detach, you stop forcing connections. You stop pushing for conversations that don't want to be had. You stop trying to make people stay who were already halfway out the door. Instead, you let life speak. You let people show you who they are, and you believe them the first time. This kind of surrender is not weakness. It's wisdom, because not everything that slips through your fingers was meant to be held. And sometimes the very thing you're trying so hard to fix is the very thing that's holding you back from becoming who you were always meant to be. Detachment doesn't just heal your heart, it sharpens your vision. It brings clarity to what you truly value. It allows you to step back and observe without the fog of desperation clouding your judgment. You start to see patterns instead of promises. You start to feel peace instead of pressure, and you start living from a grounded place where your emotional well-being is no longer on the line every time someone makes a decision that doesn't include you. And something strange happens in that space. When you finally stop needing them to return, that's often when they do. Not because you played games, not because you manipulated the silence, but because your energy shifted. Because your detachment whispered something most people never hear: I don't need you to be okay. That message doesn't beg, it doesn't chase, it simply radiates a calm, confident presence that becomes unforgettable. People are used to being pursued, they're used to having leverage, but when they meet someone who can love without losing themselves, who can stay open without being desperate, who can release with grace instead of guilt, it disorients them, it makes them reflect, it creates space they didn't expect, and in that space, they start to feel the difference between being wanted and being needed. The irony of detachment is that it creates space for real connection, because when your hands are no longer clenching a specific outcome, they're open to what's real, open to who actually chooses you freely, open to something deeper than what you could have controlled. And if they return, let it be because they saw your value on their own. Let it be because they recognize the weight of your absence, not because you begged them to remember. Let it be because they had the courage to meet you where you are now, not where you were when you still needed them to choose you. But if they don't return, that's okay too, because your story never depended on their role. Your peace isn't waiting on their next move, and your purpose is not paused until their heart aligns with yours. That's the gift of detachment. It teaches you that you are already whole, that no matter who stays or goes, no matter what unfolds or unravels, you have already chosen yourself, and no outcome can take that from you. So breathe, Let go. Let things be what they are without forcing them into what you hoped they would be. Watch who shows up when you stop reaching. Watch what stays when you no longer hold so tightly. And trust that what's real, what's meant, will never require you to abandon your peace just to keep it. Detachment isn't the end of love. It's the beginning of your freedom. And once you've tasted that, you'll never beg again. Not because your heart is closed, but because it's finally protected. And from that place, you'll begin to attract people, not who want to complete you, but who come because they see you as already whole. That's where real connection begins, not in clinging to outcomes, but in standing fully, fearlessly in your truth, no matter how the story ends. From my personal perspective, there's a certain kind of strength that doesn't roar. It doesn't fight for the last word. It doesn't beg to be chosen. It simply chooses itself and lives in that decision, quietly and unwaveringly. After everything I've read, written, and lived through, I've come to believe that the most powerful transformation a man can undergo is the journey from needing to be understood to simply understanding himself. From trying to hold people close to holding himself accountable. From chasing affection to cultivating self-respect. Each principle we've explored, being unshakable in your peace, mastering emotional detachment, focusing on purpose, using silence, committing to growth, enforcing boundaries, and detaching from outcomes, forms a framework for not just surviving pain, but evolving because of it. These aren't just lofty ideals or abstract philosophies, they're battle-tested truths. I've lived them, and I know many men out there have too. They're born in those raw, sleepless nights when you wonder what went wrong, in the echo of unanswered messages, in the weight of carrying someone who couldn't carry you back, in the moment you realize that you've been giving your energy to people who were only ever meant to be passing lessons, not permanent fixtures. And somewhere in the silence, in the letting go, in the stillness of no longer trying, you find something greater than comfort. You find clarity. You stop needing explanations. You stop needing validation. You stop needing the ending to be rewritten. Because now, your story doesn't depend on who stayed, who apologized, or who came back. It depends on the man you became when you decided to stop bleeding for people who never tried to understand your wounds. You become rooted, grounded, magnetic, not because you tried to be, but because you finally remembered who you are. If there's one truth that ties all of this together, it's this. The more you focus on building yourself, the less you chase what was never built to last. Life will test you. People will test you. Your old patterns will tempt you to react, to explain, to compromise your values just to feel wanted. But growth isn't found in the familiar. It's found in the resistance to go back to what nearly broke you. The most painful exits often open the doors to the most powerful evolutions. And the man who is willing to be alone for a while, who's willing to sit with the silence, do the work, and not settle just to soothe the ache, is the man who will one day walk with a presence that needs no introduction. In this modern age, where distractions are constant, where attention is currency, and where self-worth is often mistaken for external validation, protect your peace like it's gold, because it is. You don't have to perform to be valued. You don't have to chase to be loved. You don't have to shout to be heard. What you do have to do is commit to growth, to solitude, to self-respect, to the long, sometimes quiet road of becoming. Let others wonder. Let them miss you. Let them talk. Your job is to keep rising, because at the end of the day, what you build in silence will speak volumes long after the noise has faded. And the best part? You won't need anyone to see it. You'll already know. If this message spoke to something deep inside you, take a moment to reflect. And if it feels right, like this video and comment below. not just for engagement, but as a quiet declaration to yourself that you're ready for something different. In the next section, we bring everything together: the silence, the detachment, the purpose, the growth, the boundaries, the peace. It all aligns into one final transformation. And when that shift happens, you stop chasing what isn't meant for you. You stop needing to be chosen to feel whole. You become the man people remember, not because you were loud, but because your presence lingered, because your absence made them reflect, because your calm was unforgettable. That's how the dynamic changes, not through force, not through fear, but through a quiet evolution that no longer needs validation. And the most beautiful part? By the time they realize your value, you'll no longer need their recognition, because you won't just be more attractive to others, you'll finally be proud of the man you've become. If you're ready for that shift, subscribe now, because the next step isn't about them, it's about you. And your transformation starts here,